just under 1 week since Donald Trump became the 47th president-elect of the United States, Trump's cabinet is beginning to take shape as his transition team looks to make a seamless move to the White House. Republican lawmakers who have been faithful supporters of Trump are aiming for key administration positions, as the president-elect will most certainly have full control of Congress. Joining me now to break it all down is the Hill's national political reporter, Julia Manchester. We're going to take a closer look at how the Trump administration is taking shape and other news from Washington. Julia, thanks for joining us.
Good to see you, Michael.
Let's talk about these beginning cabinet appointments. We had a new one just this morning. Elise Stefanik, Congresswoman from New York, U.S. Ambassador to the UN. There's also been Tom Homan as border czar, and of course, Susie Wiles as White House Chief of Staff. What's your take on these beginning cabinet appointments? How is it setting the tone for what the Trump administration is going to look like?
Look, it's no surprise for someone like Elise Stefanik. We know that she and Tom Homan have proved their loyalty to former President Trump. Loyalty is a huge thing to Trump, I should say President-elect Trump. Big factor in all of this, but they also match up with his agenda. So for someone like Tom Homan, he is a hardliner on immigration. Stephen Miller, who we understand will once again have a senior advisor role or administration
That's right.
role.
Deputy Chief of Staff.
Deputy Chief of Staff, yes. He's someone who's a hardliner on immigration. And with an administration who wants to start on day one with these mass deportations, it's going to be important for them to have someone who's going to have people that support that. And these two men certainly fit that bill. So no surprise there. For Elise Stefanik, I think she's emblematic of the very pro-Israel stance this administration is going to take. We know that she had that very viral moment roughly 11 months ago in front of the presidents of a number of Ivy League schools when she asked them a very simple question, about whether the genocide of Jews, her words, was acceptable on college campuses, and she got a lot of bipartisan praise from Democrats and Republicans for asking that question. But she has, always had this very pro-Israel stance. She was seen as a vice presidential contender,
she was mentioned on the short
for a
list.
while. Yes, definitely on the short list. And during that time, she actually gave an address to the Knesset, Israel's parliament, over the summer. So she is someone who is seen very vocally pro-Israel. And with the United Nations, you have a lot of Republicans and conservatives who have been critical of the UN and their stance on Israel, so it makes sense she's in there.
I wonder if House Republicans are thrilled about it because it's going to have their numbers slimmed down for this majority, but that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time. Let's stick on the cabinet appointments because one that we're waiting for is Secretary of State. It's, of course, one of the most important positions within an administration's cabinet. Some names that are being floated, Florida Senator Marco Rubio, former presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, maybe Rick Grinnell. Talk to me about what you're hearing about who is potentially going to have that Secretary of State job.
So Rick Grinnell, obviously an alum of the Trump administration. He has been floated for this position for quite some time. But it's interesting looking at Marco Rubio and Vivek Ramaswamy, very different parts of the Republican Party. I think a lot more, I don't want to say establishment because Trump is the establishment of the Republican Party now, but Marco Rubio might appeal to a more broad swath of Republicans. He is popular with moderate or more centrist Republicans, and he's also been able to prove himself with more MAGA-like Republicans. But Vivek Ramaswamy, certainly seen as a figure who is emblematic of the populist MAGA-esque part of the Republican Party. I think Marco Rubio might have a little bit of an advantage having experience working in foreign policy in the Senate on the Intelligence Committee, but it's interesting to see these two names floated as we're seeing, very different kinds of Republicans being floated for these positions.
Yeah, absolutely. Stacking up, like you mentioned, to get the ball rolling on day one. Someone who may not be in the cabinet, but is likely going to be very close to the president-elect throughout his administration, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
He was obviously a huge surrogate for Trump on the campaign trail in the final stretch to Election Day. He won't serve in the cabinet, but he's likely to be a key advisor here. He's already been on at least one call with Vladimir Putin, a foreign leader, with the president-elect. What do you make of Elon Musk's involvement right now in politics and around Trump, and how do you see him contributing to a Trump administration?
Well, you don't have to look any farther than some of the events at Mar-a-Lago since former President Trump, now President-elect Trump's victory. Elon Musk was literally in the Trump family photo. Yeah. He is golfing with the Trumps. Kai Trump, Donald Trump Jr.'s daughter, posted a picture with him. He is very close. He is in that inner orbit of the Trump world, the Trump family. And what that tells us is that he certainly has Donald Trump's ear. The fact that he's putting him on phone calls with foreign leaders, very important foreign leaders, really speaks a lot. So for Elon Musk, even if he doesn't have an official role within the administration, I don't even know know if that necessarily matters because he has Donald Trump's ear, and we know that Donald Trump is listening to those around him.
So we've spoken about who could be in the cabinet. Now let's talk about who's not going to be in the cabinet, because Donald Trump went on Truth Social yesterday and he said over the weekend, and said Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo are not going to serve in my administration. Of course, two former very key figures in the first Trump administration. What do you make of this? Nikki Haley particularly, it's been such a rocky relationship with the president-elect, supporting him, primarying him, running against him, and then endorsing him, but she didn't appear on the campaign trail with him. What do you make of this new development?
Well, look, there were also some reported tensions between the two of them when she was UN ambassador. So they have clashed in the past. There's been that tension. She primaried him and was a very vocal critic of his. I mean, it took a while for the two of them to come back around to each other. And like you said, we didn't see her on the campaign trail.
It never seemed like a full...
Exactly. So there was always that tension between the two of them. So I actually don't think this is particularly surprising. I don't even know if it's particularly surprising to someone like Nikki Haley. Like I said, Trump is someone who values loyalty. And, you know, for better or for worse, she hasn't always been loyal to Trump. Mike Pompeo, I wouldn't say he's been as critical of the former president, but there have been some shades of criticism, like with the classified documents case. So, you know, certainly a departure from where Mike Pompeo was during the first administration. Obviously, he had two very critical, high-level roles. So, you know, it's that loyalty factor. But also, look, Trump wants to bring in potentially new people. Remember, he has a new orbit around him.
Sure.
People like Elon Musk, Susie Wiles. So he's sort of getting these, he's probably getting these new names floated that could mean that older names, names that have been in past administrations may get kicked out.
A lot can change in 4 years, basically,
Right,
saying
right.
that. So when we talk about the transition, it's not just the idea of making sure that your cabinet is ready, but there's actually a legitimate transition period and process here. The Trump campaign, though, hasn't actually signed on to that transition process. Can you break down what exactly is happening here and what the ramifications could be?
Yeah, so what you have right now is essentially the Trump transition team basically making these decisions known publicly. I think it's interesting because they're actually calling on Senate Republicans to fast track a lot of these cabinet nominations, putting pressure on them. And he's sort of, in a way, Donald Trump throwing a carrot to the three people, Rick Scott, John Thune, and John Cornyn, the three senators vying for Mitch McConnell's position as Senate Majority Leader, saying, hey, we should fast track these, a process that's normally used in emergencies, but Donald Trump trying to push them to do it this time. Florida Senator Rick Scott automatically raising his hand, absolutely.
Very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. The other two, I mean, supportive, but maybe, not as enthusiastic as Rick Scott is. So you're trying to see them do as much of this as possible. You're likely going to see, a lot of these executive orders that Donald Trump wants to carry out, stuff on immigration, that's probably going to be pre-written before day one so we can quickly get it out of the way. So the process is being fast-tracked across the board.
Sure. Let's go back to Elise Stefanik for a second, because I mentioned it, but I want to dive into this idea right now. Republicans haven't officially clinched the majority of the House, but they're on the precipice. They need 2 more seats right now. They're at 216. Of course, it's the race to 218 for the majority. If Elise Stefanik, well, actually, first off, the majority, if Republicans get it, is likely to be very slim. Ultra-thin majority, similar to what we've seen for the past 2 years. Now, if Elise Stefanik is taken out of the House Republican Conference to put at the UN, what does that mean for House Republican majority? I mean, it's already going to be thin. It's going to get even more thinner.
Well, it means it could get even more thin. It's, I would imagine, a special election after a replacement is named would be held at some point, and I think that seat, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, it's in a rural part.
Very safe red.
Yes, very safe
very
red. But at the same time, though, Republicans, they're on fragile ground in the House, even if they have this, and you're more of an expert on this than I am, but, Speaker Johnson is going to want to hold on to that speakership, and we know that speakerships from the past 2 years or so aren't guaranteed, particularly among Republicans. So maybe it creates, I don't know, you know more about this than I do, but maybe it creates an interesting scenario for them going going forward.
Big question is going to be, when does Stefanik officially go to the UN, and when does her successor get elected? Because within that time, Republicans are going to be down a vote, and it could be crucial.
And you're going to see a lot of choreography.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I want to get back now to that House control. Break down where exactly the race for the House is. I mentioned there are 216 seats right now. Democrats have 209. There are 10 seats up for grabs. We're waiting for a lot of seats in California. Am I right?
Yeah, California, Southern California, that area. Not surprising there. Look, we look at California as this heavily blue state, but Trump made inroads there at the top of the ticket on election night, and we're seeing that really trickle down to a number of these House seats. We know that Republicans have held a number of deep red House seats in California, but I think you're starting to see the Trump effect, that impact that you also saw in other, New York, for example, even in deep red Florida, which is now officially deep red, you've seen more of a turnout that has impacted down ballot races. So we're just waiting for those to come in.
Push the House to the side. Let's go back to the Senate quickly. You alluded to it, the leadership race right now between John Thune, between John Cornyn and Rick Scott. Break down where Trump currently is on this. He hasn't officially endorsed one candidate, but some of his allies have a favorite, and you mentioned the appointments.
Yeah, so we talked about Elon Musk and how important Elon Musk is. Even if he doesn't have an official role within the administration or the government, he has the presidency. Elon Musk has endorsed Rick Scott, the Florida senator, won election by 12 points in that state. I think that's very important because we know that, like I said, a lot of these pro-MAGA figures like Elon Musk, like Charlie Kirk, for example, from Turning Point USA, they're getting behind Rick Scott and going against people like John Thune and John Cornyn, even sort of painting Cornyn and Thune, who are conservatives, very conservative.
Yes.
They're painting them as rhinos or Republican in name only. So it goes to show there might be this internal battle brewing within the Senate and in the Republican Party over the pro-MAGA or the MAGA-esque wing and maybe the non-MAGA wing of the party. So it's fascinating to see that play out. We would have said months ago that Rick Scott would be a long shot for this position. We know that he's clashed with McConnell in the past and by extension clashed with people like Thune and Cornyn who have been on McConnell's side. So the fact that he's getting this far is very notable.
And also worth noting, it's a secret ballot.
Yes.
So Trump allies can push as much as they want, but it's going to be a real question of, does that actually resonate among the senators when they go and vote on Wednesday? I want to get back to the presidential race quickly, Julia, because we got a call finally for Arizona, which means that President-elect Trump officially swept all 7 battleground states. We also, though, found out that Ruben Gallego won in the state of Arizona. So a split there, right? Trump winning the state, but Gallego winning that open Senate seat. Is it possible that we may see a legal fight from Carrie Lake here? We know that she is engaged in conversations about the 2020 election being stolen. Are we expecting any challenges for her race?
I mean, it's possible, but I don't think she has as much ground to stand on this time. I mean, I think in 2020, a lot of it was fueled by Donald Trump, pushing this legal fight. Or I should say in 2022, it was from Donald Trump pushing the legal fight from 2020. And I think in general, Republicans want to be able to consolidate their wins and move on. So there could be the possibility for a distraction if she were to do that. And overall, though, I think you're going to see, I mean, this is just emblematic of the split ticket voting.
Yeah.
We've seen in Arizona, Nevada, Florida to an extent. Florida had an abortion ballot measure that got a majority, didn't get enough to pass, but it got a majority of votes, but Donald Trump won that state. I was talking to a Republican strategist today who said, that's great for us this cycle, but we do have some concerns going into 2026 and 2028 because Democrats are going to be figuring out or trying to figure out how they win back those voters who split their tickets.
Yeah. Last thing, Julia, one more policy question on the Trump administration. The transition team says it has plans to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accords. Talk to me about this.
Look, this isn't the first time. We know that Trump did it in 2016. Biden then came back into the Paris Climate Accords. Not unexpected. Donald Trump really wanting to push non-renewable energy and also, from an environmental standpoint. But also, look, Donald Trump has voiced a lot of skepticism about these global alliances. It clashes with that America First message. So no surprise there. This was expected.
All right, Julia Manchester, thank you so much. Great being with you. We're now taking a closer look at the growing humanitarian crisis at the southern border. With January's presidential inauguration nearing very quickly, Texas authorities are bracing for a potential migrant surge, and an increasing number of unaccompanied children are making this journey alone. What risks do they face, and how are officials responding? News Nation's Jorge Ventura joins us from Eagle Pass, Texas, with the latest.
I'm here on the Eagle Pass border, and right behind us is the Rio Grande, one of the deadliest crossing points throughout the southern border. Now, Border Patrol agents and Texas DPS are already seeing a spike in migrant counters, but also a growing number of unaccompanied children traveling alone. Just this past weekend, Texas DPS encountered a group of over 100 migrants that included 13 children, some young as 7 years old. These children often rely on strangers to guide them through cartel-controlled areas, adding extreme risk to their already dangerous journey. Texas DPS reports a surge in unaccompanied minors, with over 100 children arriving alone in the first half of October. Many marked with colored wristbands by cartels, signaling payment for crossing through dangerous areas. When these children encounter authorities, they often have a note with them with a sponsor address. Recently, a group of unaccompanied minors was found with addresses to sponsors in states like New York, California, Colorado, and Florida. And as of November 1st, the Department of Health and Human Services is caring for over 6,000 unaccompanied children, working to reduce that average stay to just 34 days while prioritizing their safety. As more children cross alone, the surge is already a reality here in Eagle Pass, even before the election results were known. Now authorities are preparing for what could be even a bigger influx as January's inauguration approaches. Now, authorities say they're getting ready for any possible scenarios with anticipated surge before January's inauguration. Texas has now ramped up security under Operation Lone Star. In Brownsville and El Paso, National Guard soldiers alongside local law enforcement are running intense battle-ready drills. Captain Daniel Mannon of Task Force East says these exercises keep teams prepared for swift, coordinated action if these larger groups do arrive. In Eagle Pass, where I am, National Guard soldiers from Texas and Louisiana are mortifying key sections with razor wire, expanding that border wall in Cameron and Maverick County. Officials believe these measures could help manage that surge, but say they will remain on high alert until January.
And that's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Mychael Schnell. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Hill's YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.